them, the administration has since urged the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission to ensure availability of prepaid meters to Nigerians. Already, more than half of the country's electricity consumers have access to meters with distribution ongoing. Now, the gains made so far in the power sector has not been without challenges. Going forward, how can the Buhari administration surmount these challenges and consolidate on the gains? Guest on Good Morning Nigeria will be providing answers shortly.
Many thanks there for the background. Now, with us in the studios to discuss this issue in further detail, we'd like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Mama. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me.
Also here with us in the studios is Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo, Acting Director, Renewable Energy and Rural Power Access of the Federal Ministry of Power, and is also Chairman of the Project Delivery Committee for Mumbai Hydroelectric Power Project. And of course, he's been a technical assistant, we understand, to 4 successive ministers of power, including the incumbent. Engineer, your titles are many. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Kingsley, and thank you for having us. Good morning, Nigeria.
His titles are many, and he's a target this morning.
That's right.
He's a target this morning. You know, having served several ministers. Yes. All right, and joining us here in Abuja as well is Dr. Joy Okaji, Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies. It's good to have you, madam.
It's a pleasure. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. And via Skype, also in Abuja here, is Oyebode Fadi, Head, Corporate Communications, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. It's also a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
All right. Once again, I'm delighted to have you all with us in the studios this morning. This is one in our series on the 5th anniversary of the Buhari administration. It's been in office since 2015, and incidentally, on Friday, we took on the agricultural subsector of the economy. The evidence is there. If you're looking for Nigerian rice, you will find it in the marketplace. And so when the government says this is what we are doing in agriculture, particularly with regard to rice production and sale, those, of course, who patronize the marketers know that they can find rice. But with regard to power, the lingering experience would appear to be that Nigerians are still in search of stable and steady power supply. What's happening in that sector, Honorable Minister?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. President for appointing me as the Minister of Power under this administration. And as you all know, power sector is a challenging to economics of this country. And however, I would like to tell you that for the last 5 years, we have achieved a significant achievement in the power sector. Globally, to determine achievement in any power sector, we have 2 things to consider. First, the infrastructure, and then number 2, the quality of the services. If you now take the infrastructure, you discover that Mr. President has come out with a plan and also an initiative called PPI, Presidential Power Initiative. On this initiative, it is the responsibility of that is to make sure that all the infrastructure has been improved. So many substations has been in place, has been constructed across the country. We have improved our 330 kVA, which is the highest voltage transmission in the country. We have improved it across the country. We have also improved our 132 substation. We have increased it across the country. We also improved 330 11 kV to 415 expansion to the customers. Secondly, the legacy projects. We also developed that project, and currently Kashimbila has been completed, which is about 40 megawatts. Dadinko also completed, and we reached up to 65 or 70% of completion in Zangero, which is in Niger State. Today I can tell you one of the largest hydropower projects in Nigeria, which is Mumbai Hydropower. The project that has been lingering for over 40 years, it has now commenced. We have finished the feasibility studies. We have finished the land and the aerial survey. We are just waiting for the contractors to mobilize to the site. It's also an achievement. I also want to tell you, if you now take quality of services, we have improved our services. Before this government, we give light not more than less than 10 hours in a day. But today I can tell you we give light from 18 to 24 hours in a day. It's also a significant improvement. We are trying to make light constant, stable, and also affordable. Part of it also, this is in this administration, I want to tell you, for the first time in the history of the power sector, we have reached energy generation up to 112,000 megawatt hour. We can also generate, before now, we have less than 3,000 megawatts of capacity generation, but today we can generate up to 5,500 capacity. Although we cannot transmit all due to some constraint of the evacuation of transmission company. The president has also entered a memorandum of understanding with the German government to come and align and then straighten the predicament that is hindering the transmission and the distribution. Mainly the problem we have is the problem of distribution, that is transmission and distribution. So the government have now entered an agreement with the German government to come and straighten this problem, so that whatever we generate, we can now transmit and then distribute equally. It's also an achievement. We also have developed a plant that we can serve, underserved and unserved Nigerian with electricity using off-grid, that is solar home system. We have borrowed money from the World Bank that can give us that privilege to also provide electricity for those that have no electricity in the country. This is also a significant achievement also. And the cement company also will now help us in aligning the transmission, boosting our generation from 5,000 to 7,000, 2002, 2001. And we want to achieve 11,000 at the end of, maybe before the end of 2003. So that when we generate, because we have the capacity, the installed capacity of our generation is about 13,000, which is also a great achievement. Our major problem is not generation for now. We have solved the problem. It is in this administration that today I can tell you we have installed capacity of 13,000 megawatts. Though we generate only maximum of 7,000, 7,005, and then transmit 7,000 and also distribute less than 4,000 due to some technical and commercial losses in the distribution sector. These are also part of the achievement. This is the summary of what I can tell you for now.
Yes, well spoken indeed, Honorable Minister. I want to ask you one other question, before we go to the technicalities, where we're going to involve Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo to give us details. But let me just ask you this. We have the GENCOs, we have the DISCOs, we have the TCN. what is really the problem of and the nature of relationship between these establishments? Because Nigerians have come to begin to think in the direction of the fact that there is a level of discord, between these establishments, which are also very, very instrumental, to power supply. Because some persons will think that there is some level of mendacity here, in other words, untruthfulness, from all these the companies, generation, distribution, and what have you. Nigerians don't seem to really know the truth about their relationship that is culminating into, some difficulties in terms of, distributing power to Nigerians. Lead us into what you understand about the relationship and how has it affected, government policy with respect to power generation and transmission.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, when I assumed duty, appointed as a Minister of Power, the first problem I see in the sector is the lack of coordination. There's really seriously lack of coordination in the power sector. You find out why generating company are operating differently and they are reporting to a different person, and transmission also are operating independently and reporting to a different person, and also distribution also feeling that they are also independent, and then 40–60% of the government share, they also report to a different person. So all what I was trying to do is to coordinate, to make sure we focus, and then we also report to one person. So that, because, sometimes the generation can generate, maybe let's say, just like the way I told you, it can generate up to 7,000 plus, and the transmission company will tell them, I will not take this generation that you did, because I am not capable. I have some of my cables that are weak. I have some of my lapses. So let me straighten my transmission company, my transmission gadget before I pick this. And then the transmission company also want to transmit to distributors what they collected from the generation, and then the distribution will tell you, no, we just have to wait because of the problems we have at the edges, because of the problem of losses, technical losses and commercial losses. We are not going to take all, because by the time we take all, we cannot pay you all. So these are the misalignment that I'm trying to coordinate and solve and make sure that we are moving in the same direction so that we achieve the target of Mr. President.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let's bring in now Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo, who is Acting Director of Renewable Energy and Rural Power Access and the Federal Ministry of Power, plus other titles that he holds. Engineer Yabo, of course, you've had the benefit of working with a number of ministers in the power sector, and listening to the explanation by the Honorable Minister of Power, I would like you to explain further to the viewer who is watching this, so the viewer can make sense of it. The entire value chain, we say, yeah, we can generate so much, we cannot evacuate so much. If you evacuate so much, we cannot distribute so much. In the meantime, upstream, we're still going ahead with the construction of new power structures and so on and so forth. But at home, we don't have power. In the offices, in the industry, we don't have power. Regular, constant, and affordable power supply. What is the issue?
Well, thank you very much again, Kingsley. The issue is usually your weakest link is your strength in the power system, in the power value chain. That means the last point that could connect you is the last that will give you power. Currently, like the Honorable Minister did explain, we have an installed capacity of about 13,000 megawatts. Now, out of this, about 7,500 is available. But coming down to transmission, it's been reported that we have about 7,000, and in some cases it's been reported 8,000 megawatts of ability to transmit power from the generation end to distribution end. Well, when you get to the distribution end, you find the maximum capacity that has been recorded is about 5,300. Now, unfortunately, the power that you take into the homes is subject to what particular distribution infrastructure you have around those homes. So the entire issue is that for you to have power stable, you have to have the system fully aligned. In the first, just like the Honorable Minister said, what we have seen is development that are isolated. Because the sector has been privatized, the generation companies are working independent. The transmission system is also, of course, working independent, and distribution company working independent. So you are faced with a situation where you must, first of all, ensure that the handshake, the interface between the parties is aligned and working. And one of the new things that this particular administration has done, which is quite commendable, is the fact that the Honorable Minister, and indeed Mr. President, through the Presidential Power Initiative, which sometimes can be called as the National Electrification Roadmap, is such that you are able now to ensure that you have a company like Siemens with very high track record coming in to ensure that those interface issues that don't allow power that is generated to get into the transmission system and then move on into distribution systems are handled. So what happened in the Siemens program is that at the highest level of the two governments, that is the government of Nigeria and Germany, the two presidents saw the need to agree to work together to support the Nigerian power system. And in doing so, Siemens was identified as the company that is going to be able to do this particular exercise. What Siemens is going to do is simply to ensure that all those bottlenecks are being addressed harmoniously, and then both distribution and transmission are able to work around the sector seamlessly.
I just wondered, Engineer Yabo, explain again the role of Siemens. Siemens is not a new company in Nigeria. I mean, they've been around for decades. And one would wonder why they were not tapped early on, to help clear up the clogged areas along the value chain. So exactly what is Siemens going to do? Is it now a magic bullet that will help us resolve the issues between generation and transmission, and then again between transmission and distribution? Because we keep hearing about inadequate infrastructure. At some point, they were talking about the loop. The transmission loop was weak, it was aged, they needed to change it, and at some point they said, okay, the arc is now almost completed so that we can have a full cycle. So exactly what is Siemens coming to do, and exactly what is it doing now?
Now, Siemens is going to have to do rehabilitations and in many cases expansion. The program is structured into 3 phases. Phase 1 is going to identify some quick wins that will allow the evacuation of the about 2,000 megawatts stranded. If you remember, I mentioned the fact that generation has about 7,000 megawatts that is currently available, while transmission is also having something within that range, but the ability to take that power into the distribution company is impossible. Now, what Siemens will do within the phase 1 is to ensure that the power that is being generated and transmitted at 7,000 megawatt level is also delivered into the distribution companies and into the customer space. So essentially, this is the main focus. Before now, it has been isolated planning. But under this current arrangement, it's going to be an end-to-end system. Now, as well, like the Honorable Minister has mentioned earlier, by this particular thing could be achieved within the shortest possible. In fact, the target is to finish by 2021. Now, moving on, already about 13,000 mega of installed capacity is available, but then don't forget, even if you have this capacity, you need somewhere to take it for you to be able to deliver it to customers. So the next batch, phase 2 of Siemens work, is also going to be able to ensure that additional transformation and distribution systems are put together. And this work is being done in sync with both the stakeholders together. That means transmission company of Nigeria and distribution company of Nigeria as well. So in essence, what Siemens is doing is aligning the entire value chain through coordination, as the Honorable Minister has said. Because once you don't coordinate, once you don't have a common vision, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to be able to deliver on the demands of the sector.
Yes, Engineer Farouk Yusuf, yeah, we're still going to remain with you for now because, you know, the unbundling of the power sector was greeted with a feeling of nostalgia among Nigerians, and that we believe that immediately that unbundling exercise was completed, that things are going to be turned around in the power sector. And now many Nigerians say just for positions, you know, buying up, you know, what they could. That's why we have the Gencos and Tiscos and what have you. And now, in the long run, we begin to hear the fact that these companies are not well fortified in terms of equipment. They begin to complain about equipment, facilities, inability, incapacitation at different levels. Now, if you bring in Siemens, how is Siemens going to work with these companies? Because if you're talking about alignment, it means that you have to deal with them. What is the business format that will enable Siemens to operate freely without difficulty, knowing full well that we have people who have bought up the companies that are instrumental to what we're doing?
Now, Siemens is actually meant to come with the silver bullet, if you like. Now, the issue is, if you remember, the power sector privatization that was done has a fundamental issue which has been discussed severally. Now, the issue is, the key issue here is the fact that here we are with a privatized sector, but a sector that cannot attract lending. Power system is highly capital intensive. So by the basis of privatization, the whole idea is to be able to attract additional financing into the sector. But unfortunately, when the companies were handed over in November, 1st November 2013, clearly there were a lot of bankability issues around them. Here I mean the ability of the companies to, on their balance sheets, attract lending. Unfortunately as well, the owners, that is the preferred bidders, turns out also to be companies that may not necessarily have the cash, the liquidity to be able to do this investment. And so the entire privatization of the sector, which was aimed to attract investment, to attract expansion, turns out to be a privatization that is actually static. And don't forget, the entire value chain has to align for you to be able to walk around. If you take, for instance, starting from gas generation, Nigerian electricity industry is a mix of gas and hydros. And then for you to be able to generate power from gas, you ought to buy the gas. As at the time this privatization was done, the mix is in the range of 20 for hydro and then 80 for gas. And if the gas industry, the pricing framework is not fortified to be able to allow for effective gas supply into the industry, you end up having a lot of issues. Now, beyond that, the distribution companies in particular that have been around were hinged on tariffs that are targeted around forex, around gas prices, around inflation, and most importantly, around the total amount of energy that can be pushed into their networks. So looking at all of this, without investment within the distribution companies, you have a lot of gaps that created liquidity issues where generators are pushing power at maybe the range of 5 megawatts. The transmission is peaking power, but distribution companies are unable to take this power. So you have a situation where the total payback into the market is less than 30% at some point. So this created that latitude, and that is what the Siemens program is coming to actually address by virtue of aligning the system so that the entire value chain will be able to function as a commercially viable entity.
Engineer Farouk, yeah, well, thank you very much. We'll return to the issue of alignment of the value chain. Let's come back to the Honorable Minister, Engineer Salem. Engineer Salem, while you were indicating the accomplishments in the power sector in recent times. You did talk about your initial observation. When you came in, you found that critical segments of the power sector were reporting to one body, another one reporting to another body. And the question that arises immediately is, what did you find to be the effective role of the Regulatory Commission? Because under the privatization program, that once you unbundled and you privatized, you needed to have an effective regulator. What have you found in terms of the role of the regulator, helpful or otherwise?
Oh, thank you very much. I can tell you it's helpful. And but the only predicament here I have with the regulators, you know, these are the issue of law. The issue of law. They have been established by law. And it is their responsibility to regulate. And it is their responsibility when there is problem, a such problem, is for them to come in. My, as a minister, is just a policy direction. Assuming, let's say, you want to say, okay, you want to increase your tariff. Then I will now ask, have you now improved your power supply? Have you not metered your customers? So that one, I should make sure that is done before now the next should sanction whoever that is responsible for whatever.
Okay. Yeah, but the point always arose that NERC itself, that's to say the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, was handicapped in sanctioning errant players in the value chain because government had its own collateral responsibility which it wasn't fulfilling. How are you going to resolve this? Because Engineer Yobo tells us, okay, Siemens is coming to streamline. Is Siemens going to be a super player above NEC? Is Siemens also now going to take on the responsibility of government? Exactly what are we getting at? I'm asking these questions because the more you, as it were, disaggregate the issues in the power sector, the more we find that there are pieces that do not quite fit to make us see that the puzzle is now a whole. Something gets left done on somewhere, and that thing gets left undone. With the issue of NBET is there, which is the bulk electricity trader, what it is doing, how well it is doing it, and so on and so forth. So what is the handicap of NEC from what you have found out, and how is this being dealt with?
Well, one of the handicap of NEC is maybe it is the responsibility of the NEC whenever such thing happen, you know, to call on the license or the agreement between the discourse and maybe distribution or transmission company. And right now, the exercise is going on, and we are reviewing the whole thing, and I have directed that they should also revisit the issue and make sure that everybody is doing his due diligence on the duty.
All right, sir. Okay, let's come to Dr. Joy Okaji, the Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, that's the GENCOs. Of course, we've listened to the Minister and Engineer Yabo discuss a number of issues that Kingsley and I have raised in the course of this conversation. And you know, you are playing a very key role in the value chain, in the power value chain. And Nigerians don't seem to be excited, you know, when we hear about GENCOs or DISCOs and what have you. That means you seem to be having some challenges that is making it difficult for you to perform at an optimal level. Now, let us share one of those challenges that you have, because ordinarily, I'm not sure Nigerians will believe that you are doing quite very well.
Thank you very much. Once more, good morning, Nigerians. Thank you, Honorable Minister, as well as my colleague, Engineer Yabo, for your insights. Now, what are the challenges of the GENCOs? As Engineer Yabo said, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And the power sector is a value chain. So if one part of the chain is weak, apparently the chain cannot be said to be strong enough. And that is exactly what the GENCOs are facing. On the 1st of November 2013, the power assets in the distribution and the generation were handed over to private entities. Performance agreements were signed between these entities and BP as a privatizing entity. And in those performance agreements, there were KPIs, or key performance indicators. That's the meaning of KPI. So for within which, and the timeline was 5 years, the first 5 years. Section 2 of the performance agreement says that after 5 years, there should be a performance assessment, a review to see how these entities have performed. 5 years became 5 years on the 31st of October 2018. And the generation companies did their own assessment, and we have our reports of how far we've gone. And BP, in several media fora as well as in their publication, have attested to the fact that the generation companies have met and have even exceeded their performance agreement. The question then is, has there been any assessment on the other counterparty to the performance agreement? The last we checked was that the BPDG promised that the DISCOs, the performance will be carried out by 31st of December last year. And this is, we're in June now. So we need to know where are they. So first and foremost, we need to understand where are the loopholes. Because for us, going by, as lawyers, lawyers understand, privity of contract. I cannot really speak to what the distribution companies are doing, because I have a contract with BP, and then I have a contract with NBET, who promises to offtake all that I can generate. But I have a chart here, because when I saw the invitation, 5 years, within 5 years, from 2015 till now, power generation in terms of availability grew by 2,000 megawatts. From 2015 till now, we grew power by 2,000 megawatts. In terms of utilization, abysmal 300 megawatts was utilized between 2015 and date. So if you check from privatization to date, we are having over 4,000 stranded. Nobody is using it. Meanwhile, the generation companies have a contract to improve capacity. And we still have expansion capacity to improve power. In fact, as we speak today, we have 13,427 megawatts installed.
Generated?
No. Installed, as in the capacity to generate. Okay. But what is available? And the reason why the available is not to 13,000 is because of a lot of hurdles. One, like my colleague mentioned, the gas. The gas needs to be paid for. We are generating power. It is not being paid for. What we receive is between, in fact, the April, is it March? The March invoice, the payment that NBET received was 11%. When you put in 100 and 11% was paid, you supply 100 akara and only 11 naira was paid. How do you produce more akara again? So this is one of the reasons why even the available capacity is just about 8,500. Otherwise, we're willing to even bring all that in. We need money to pay our services like O&M, operation and maintenance costs. We need to pay the gas suppliers who every now and then are turning us off. If you don't pay, I will not give you gas. And the Gencos have resorted to borrowing money, but till now, they have heavy burden, heavy debt.
You know, Dr. Ogaji, thanks a lot for your explanation. Before we bring, incidentally, Fadikba is also on this conversation. Let's explain this, because when you're talking about installed capacity, actual generation, and then what you will add, it's almost sounding like Kirian. It's almost sounding like our refineries. Mm-hmm. You know, I know that you're not a government entity, but you know, refineries install capacity 400-something thousand barrels, you know, per day, and then what you're able to generate 20% and so on and so forth. What business sense does it make that, say, you have an installed capacity of 10,000 megawatts, and you generate 8,000, but what you wheel out, and what is received is just about half of that. Why continue to generate 8,000 or wheel out 8,000?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. I recall that in my first response, I mentioned that at the privatization, the generation companies entered a performance agreement. Now, the KPI for the GENCOs in the performance agreement is to recover capacity. When the new owners took over from the plant, from those plants, let me just give example for some of the plants. Ugeli, now owned by Transcorp Power Limited. As at the date of takeover, what was available was 160 megawatts, 160 megawatts. As at June 2017, BP can confirm this, Ugeli has ramped up its capacity to 671 capacity, availability. They are installed in terms of machine capabilities about 900. So this is just an example. On one hand, I have a performance agreement telling me this is your role. So by contract, I just keep to my contract. I can't wait and see, okay, whether the other parties, because I don't have a hand in transmission. I don't have a hand in distribution. Because upon the privatization, the transmission company, still being owned by government, promised the generation companies that we will wheel what you can generate. So we have the contract. To that point, the GENCO signed a grid connection agreement with the transmission companies. So we also have a contract that you will evacuate whatever I can generate. But when we started, the reality was just a paper tiger. The reality is not there. The same thing on the other end of the distribution. So the generation companies are just keeping to their contract.
All right, let's go to Fadibe, Oyabude Fadibe, who is the head corporate communications, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. You have listened to other guests here in the studio, including the Honorable Minister of Power. And I'm sure that you'd like to speak to some of the issues raised, especially that of Dr. Joy, who just talked about GENCOs and what is expected of others along the power value chain. Yours is distribution. And on this program, we've hosted you when we discussed elaborately on the issue of metering, in Nigeria, which is also another big hurdle in the power sector. Now, start by perhaps responding to what Dr. Joy said about how GENCO has been able to raise its bar when it comes to performance index in the sector, and of course you can dovetail into talking about metering in Nigeria, which is also another topical issue.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Honorable Minister, and thank you for your bold and courageous moves to get the power sector to deliver on its mandate. I also like to say good morning to Dr. Ogaji and happy birthday in arrears. And then to Engineer Yabo, thank you very much for your analysis. The power sector is a very, very interesting place, and one is delighted to observe that, particularly from the government side, there has been a lot of effort to make sure that the sector deliver on its mandate. In terms of metering, that's one very, very topical issue. And of course, on several occasions that I've had the opportunity to appear on NTA Good Morning, I've tried to do some historical background to how we got to where we are currently and what we are doing to get to where we are supposed to be. It's no longer a secret thing that MAP, Meter Asset Provider, is the latest or current intervention strategy to make sure that the issue of metering is fully addressed. For instance, in AEDC, just on Friday last week, which was 5th of June, we were able to, we had reached 100,000 connection of applicants. In other words, we had metered up to 100,000 customers under the Meter Asset Provider scheme. This figure realistically speaking, compared to where we are supposed to be, is small, because by May last year, when MAP came up, we were supposed to meter 900,000 customers in 36 months. So if in about 13 months you have just done 100,000, then it means that there probably will be challenge in terms of covering the balance 800,000, which is not a static figure anyway. That figure will continue to grow because customers will continue to ask for meter. But the question is, what are the key issues that have led to that kind of performance? And a principal one, particularly dealing with the issue of MAP, a principal one is, of course, the current situation that is going on all over the world today. Just at the nick of time, as the MAP program was beginning to peak, unfortunately, we ran into this COVID situation, and that has affected. I mean, it's a notorious fact that the issue of, COVID has affected every part of every human being in the world today. So that's a major challenge. And of course, that has also affected the issue of cost. Right now, from June 1st, the cost of meter has been reviewed. 3 phases is about 90,000, and then a single phase is about 48,000 plus or thereabout. Now, these are some of the challenges that are associated with the power sector. You make your plan, you draw all your, you look at all your strategies for the implementation of the plan, and somewhere along the line, there is something here and there to disturb it. Things that are totally out of your own control. In law, we call it force majeure. That's a common terminology in contract. It's called force majeure, things that you cannot really help. But the fact remains that metering is a project that must be achieved. There are no two ways about it, because it does not make any business sense that discos will exist on estimated billing. It does not make business sense. And COVID-19 has revealed that much. Discos will tell you that in the areas where they add meter, the return was good because supply was available in the residential areas. So for those who had meters, it was very easy to deal with. But on estimated billing, the challenge will still be there. And in order to address that challenge, NEC, in its wisdom and a wonderful thing to do, came up with the capping of the estimated billing. It may not fully address the quantum of energy consumed in the residencies, but then at least people can understand, people can know that this is a minimum amount I have to pay. And when that minimum amount is recovered, of course, the other members of the value chain can therefore be serviced. So I know clearly, and I speak confidently on behalf of AEDC and indeed on behalf of the DISCOs, that metering is a project that is at the center, is a major strategic pillar for business success for DISCOs. The issue of metering is a major strategic pillar. Like I said, AEDC has been able to do 100,000 by 5th of June, in spite of the COVID issue. And we are going ahead to even do more once the meter asset providers are available.
Just briefly, I want you to clear the air here. I know you have explained this some time ago, but for further clarification, let Nigerians understand this. Now, a customer has to buy meter. You've told us 3-phase, 90,000 and what have you. That meter belongs to you, not to the customer. And the customer will have to pay for it. Now, explain this kind of a business, ideology, because we can't understand how we pay for something that doesn't belong to us, and after paying for it, we will still have to pay for power. So, explain to Nigerians why because originally, or perhaps at the beginning, Nigerians thought that look, we don't have to pay for meter; you have to supply the meter, then we pay the bills. So, what has changed?
Although I suffered some loss of signal, so I didn't get the question entirely, but I presume that what you're saying is that how can a customer pay for electricity and pay for meter at the same time when the meter belongs to the DISCO? I presume that is your question. Fine. Now, I'm happy that Dr. Ogaji is in the studio this morning. I feel very bad that I couldn't come to the studio, maybe because I was too COVID-19 conscious. But Dr. Ogaji is the owner of the product I am selling. I am selling on behalf of Dr. Ogaji and the transmission. So they expect me to pay back to them. In other words, I'm like a recovery agent for them. So once they give me the product, I need to sell the product and recover the money and go back to embed and pay in. That's why there's an embed bill and there's a market operator's bill. The issue of meter is a measuring device. Now, what have we done in this situation now? Between NEC and the discos, there is an arrangement to work out a refund modality. So at the end of the day, the customer has only helped you to make payments in advance, but the money is going back to the customer. This is one area where CAPME and MAP are similar. So we are just waiting, the discos are just waiting for the approval of the refund mechanism. Discos will not take the money from the customers and go away like that. Also remember that the reason why this has to be so is again the issue of liquidity in the sector. That is a fundamental issue which I know that the current administration is dealing with squarely. So the major challenge that is bringing about the meter asset provider and then customers advancing the money is the issue of liquidity, so that some funds can be freed for the discos to also deal with some other things. So the discos are not taking the money from the customers. In a nutshell, they are not taking the money from the customers and taking it forever. No, there will always be a refund. But as a regulated sector, we will always wait for NEC to blow the whistle before we can go ahead to do that.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Thanks also for being COVID-19 conscious. We actually asked you to stay away so that we'll take you via Skype, because we're already going to have 3 guests with us here in the studios. And of course, you've always been our guest in the studios when it is safe, to have you. Thanks a lot. We'll come back to you. Let's bring in again Engineer Farouk Yabo. Engineer Farouk, listening to Dr. Joy Ogaji, there's something that obviously will be worrisome to any observer of the electricity sector in the country. The GENCOs, they are fulfilling their bargain of the contract between BPE and themselves. And Joe Gaji says, very respectfully so, and correctly too, that it is not their business to go and monitor others who also have contracts with the BPE on account of the privatization exercise. So, ramp up your generation. They are ramping up their generation. Whatever they generate, NBET is the off-taker. NBET pays for it. But in the meantime, we have this entire leakage in the system, which is why you continue to have the issue of GENCOs being owed so much. Why has it been so difficult to say, look, can we tweak this KPI, this performance agreement, to say, we're having a problem. GENCOs, you guys are running a bit too fast, and you are leaving the others behind. Can we revise it so that what is generated may be slowed down? You can ramp up your capacity, but what you then generate can then be such that can be weighed out by TCN, which is like a laggard in the system, and then the distribution companies, which also have their own challenges. Otherwise, virtually on a daily basis, the GENCOs generate so much, and then so little is taken up, but so much that is generated is paid for by government, because NBET is a government entity. How do we deal with this kind of financial leakage in the system? And is Siemens likely to do it for us?
Thank you again, Kingsley, for an excellent question. Actually, relative to what we need, the GENCOs are not overdoing their work. Relative to what the DISCOs are able to perform, the GENCOs are overdoing their work. Now, if I go back to what the Honourable Minister said a little while ago, for a power system to be adjudged to be functional, you need infrastructure and you need to ensure high quality of service. How do you do this? This will involve increasing generation, increasing transmission, increasing distribution. But to do that, you need funding, you need investments. And how do you get this investment? Government has privatized this sector with the aim that government will not be funding it so that the market will fund itself. Unfortunately, Mr. Padipe has just mentioned that the biggest challenge we have today is that of the liquidity in the market. The power that is being pumped out up to the distribution levels or close to distribution level could not actually be translated into revenue, into cash that the entire value chain can be made. Government had recognized this much earlier in the privatization, and that was why the idea of NBET, that is Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, was established to be the credit-worthy off-taker that will sign PPAs with the generators and sign besting contracts with the generators, with distributors. Now, having done that, it is expected that it's just for comfort, but the distribution end should ramp up and be able to do that, but that is not happening. So what is government doing about this? Government, Honorable Minister has just mentioned, we have completed a number of high-level generation or power infrastructure projects, which shouldn't have been the case if only the private sector are up to their job. Now, in terms of what government is doing to deal with this problem, already NBET is getting immersed into debts starting from the Nigerian Electricity Market Support Facility by the CBN of about 213 billion, which has been absorbed, to payment assurance facility of 701, which has also been used to pay the GENCOs, and probably that is why the GENCOs are able to ramp up, because government has taken on itself to get paid to them, whether they work or, whatever it's the case. Unfortunately, on the side of the distribution company who signed the besting contracts with the MBET, 3 agencies of government are expected to ensure that head or tail the distribution companies take responsibility and pay for their commitment. And these are NAC under the license agreement they have issued to this particular generation companies, distribution companies, and the Bureau for Public Enterprise, who anchored and midwife the sales of this asset through their shareholders agreement and through their performance agreement. And then MBET through the besting contracts, where they are having that latitude to insist, because it's like you selling something to somebody and then you expecting to pay back, and this person has issued you some kind of guarantees. So there is really the need, and that is what the Honorable Minister has been saying, this issue of coordination, this issue of having to have a common vision, to understand that no one can work as an island within the current setup. We need to ensure that all these agencies are up and doing in terms of ensuring that they deliver onto that. Now, maybe before I round out on this point, what is government doing to deal with all of this program? You will be aware that one of the biggest challenge has been that of funding, because the private sector can't attract funding. So what government is doing is to bring initiatives like the Siemens, the Presidential Power Initiative, which is coming to ensure that those issues that are making the distribution company not to be able to get back their money are being dealt with. Already the market has accumulated large sums of funding gaps. And so government has created different BUPA zones, including a World Bank facility of about $1.5 billion, starting from 750, which is under the Power Sector Recovery Program. They call it P4R. Now, this is supposed to continuously ensure that the market and the tariff shortfalls difference are being managed, and the discourse are made to answer for the gaps in their remittances to both the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company and the market operators. And so what is needed is to breast up and ensure that everybody across the value chain, and indeed the customers, understand that the power sector of Nigeria is not really a government business. Government has since sold the entire power sector for almost 3 billion, and out of this they use more than half of the money to settle labor issues alone. And this is one of the biggest possibly wins for a government like ours. Many countries have tried to do this kind of system. They couldn't do it. Now the challenge is we have, in many cases, a number of little issues that we need to put together so that these things can work at the end of the day.
Okay.
Kieran, fine. I mean, I know that you're itching to say something, but Engineer Yabo, the point is this: you say you are satisfied that the Gencos are fulfilling their obligations under the contract, but in performing their part of the contract, you can see that they are outperforming other players in the contract. The question I then asked is it not possible, I don't know whether you have a legal background, is it not possible to say, look, Joy Ogaji, you're a very great dancer, but your dance steps are getting a bit, too vigorous, for the others, for the drummers, who are also part of this. Maybe you can tarry a while just to review it. Because for every day, every minute that they generate, whether it is taken off by NBET or not, whether it is taken off by TCN, whether we get to use it, NBET will pay for it. And that becomes part of the debt. I'm sure you're familiar with Enron, the electricity trading. Yeah. This is part of what led to the collapse of Enron, apart from the speculation that they all had, which was one of the largest corporate failures in the U.S. in the early part of this century. So why has government not sat back? Because they're working. Gencos are working. But, their work is almost becoming punitive to our national purse because we are not able to utilize what they are producing. So they're having high inventory. Unfortunately, you cannot store what they are producing.
No, this is exactly what government is doing. Kingsley, this is exactly the issue now that Mr. Padipe was saying government is trying to address the issue squarely. How do you address it? First of all, you need to dimension the problem. You need to dimension who is supposed to take what responsibility. You need to create transparency across the entire value chain. And you need to make sure that those contracts that are going to be killing, you prioritize those that are going to be easier for you. So as we speak, we're all aware of the Azura project. That particular project has a lot of contingent liabilities associated with it. And so government has made sure, of course, through the different transmission arrangement, that this particular burden is being taken overhead. But there are generation assets that incidentally are mostly owned by government, particularly the NIPP project, the NDPHC project, which are the ones now suffering. So the issue is that while we know we need even more power than generators are saying, we are still not asking. In fact, as we speak, there are a lot of efforts to make sure that we have additional capacity, because don't forget, we will not stay like this forever. If we decide today that we are going to stop it, we are virtually killing the entire. Of course, we all know there is direct correlations between the capacity of energy you can generate with your economic development. So we are having Vision 3030, for instance, a vision to have 30,000 megawatt by the year 2030, with 30% coming from renewables. We have the Siemens program, which set up to have 25,000 megawatt by the year 2025. If we constrain the generation companies, how do we get there? So the truth is that it's not an option for us to actually start thinking about constraining. Rather, we should ensure that there is contractual performance, there is need for payment of the right tariffs. We must graduate into a cost-reflective tariff that is efficiently delivered, not the one that you have 70% ATC and C losses, that is aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. We need to come to a system where we get to countries, similar to countries in Europe, where the losses are brought to the barest minimum so that the tariff can come down by themselves. But any issue that is going to guide us towards constraining generation because of failures of distribution, I think that is not going to be a long-term vision. We should rather, like the government is doing, take whatever decisions it takes, whoever is on the line, get him out of the way and make sure that we have a common purpose, we have a common vision for this sector to move forward.
All right, Engineer Farouk, so we have to excuse Gencos in all of this because the performance index is up there, and what you have understood, primarily, from all you've said, is the fact that the issue with the power sector is liquidity, no funds. It's as simple as that. And those who got into the business during the unbundling exercise got in there without having the finances to back up their claims. That's just the issue. Yeah. If you're bringing Siemens, is Siemens coming with money? That is the point.
Yeah.
If cement is coming with money, fair, of course, Nigerians will be happy for it. For now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will continue this conversation. Of course, I'm bringing the Honorable Minister to speak on a number of issues. Stay with us.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 22 55 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live for the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, let's come back to our guest, Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Bama. There are two issues, but the first one has to do with this. Each time we point a finger at a discourse for their non-performance, they are unable to take this because they don't have enough infrastructure, we oftentimes don't remind ourselves that government itself is a shareholder. What has government done with its equity stake in these companies? I mean, if you are a minority shareholder, you can, assuming you are being oppressed, you can rely on minority oppression rules, to get things done. And if indeed, your equity is substantial enough, what is it that has been achieved? In terms of saying, look, discourse, what we are doing is not salutary. We need to move away from what we've been getting on. And I need to remind the Honorable Minister, the one minister, former Minister of Power, Professor Nebo, at some point indicated that part of their target at the time for discourse was to ensure that their infrastructure for distribution was ramped up considerably. But we appear not to be hearing anything about that. Everything is meter.
Thank you very much. But if you remember from the initial, I told you the major problem of this sector to achieve is the infrastructure. And it is the government all this time, since the inception of this privatization, it is the government that has been taking responsibility of doing the infrastructure instead of the distribution companies who have 60%. It is now the 40% that are using the money to. You can see even the shortfall from the shortfall. The government, after generating, the GenCo generate electricity to the tune of up to 54 billion naira in every month. And it is only part of it, that is 15% of that money that GenCos pay. So the government always complete the shortfalls. It is the responsibility of the government. Instead of, say the whole infrastructure is in order so that they can get their money and then pay the GenCos. It is still the responsibility of the government. Whenever there is a problem in any infrastructure of the distribution company, it is the government that comes in and do the job of a distribution company. So that is the problem, and that is why government is saying, cement, come and do this thing once and for all, so that at the end of the day we now weigh what you did, and then we check and balance. That is the major issue.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, we're yet to get the details of what cement is going to be doing when they come, because I've initially pointed to the fact that the sector is privatized, largely privatized. and that well, Siemens is also a private entity, and it is coming to bring up a kind of alignment, within the value chain of the power sector. And what I've just indicated is the fact that the government is still spending much money in this sector. This is a sector that has been privatized, and government is still spending huge sums of money when there is a shortfall, especially when that concerns generation of electricity, as you have just explained. So let's bring in Dr. Joy once more here. You were itching to say something when Engineer Yabo was doing some expatiations on some of the issues. You can go to that, as well as tell us more. We need to learn more about GENCOs and its responsibility, and how perhaps the other partners in the chain could benefit from what you're doing, because of course if they do not function effectively and efficiently, what you're doing becomes useless to the country.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I wanted to respond to the question that Elder Kingsley asked my colleague on how, why the GENCOs, how we could come up with some viable or sustainable method of utilizing the power. There has been a lot of misalignment. The Honorable Minister of Power in his remark also mentioned that. And he also told us that he's working on those misalignments. I'm happy to hear that. There's a lot of misalignment. Now, the privatization, like I said, performance agreements were signed by BP, then NBET as the obligor or the off-taker was to sign a performance PPA with that is a power purchase agreement with the generating companies, and vesting contract with the distribution companies. Now there is a misalignment, and you want to know where is that misalignment. The original design of the market was that the vesting contract quantities, which the discos will sign with NBET, are just a vested quantity, and they should not be the norm. They are like the exception to the rule. Now, let me break it down for Nigerians to understand. For those of us that understand the oil sector, there is what we call the DSO, or the Domestic Supply Obligation. In 2010, the government found out that these IOCs are busy exporting their oil products and gas, especially outside, to earn dollars. And the domestic companies or the domestic consumption was suffering. So under, I think if I recall, Desian term, they came and signed an MOU where the government decided a vested quantity. And they signed it with the IOCs that, see, at any time T, this quantity has to be supplied to the domestic. Outside this domestic quantity, the rest, you're free to export it. The same thing needs to come to the power sector. That is the solution to this excess capacity as opposed to utilization. The generating companies have written to NBET, which is a bulk electricity trader. They've written to NEC requesting that, see, we are businessmen. We have seen that our power is increasing, but we are being restrained. From 2013 to now, we're nearly 7 years, and power is not growing. We have expansion capacity. If the market was running the way it should, by now we should be able to generate up to 20,000 megawatts. At least still not up to the demand. Because the system operator in TCN does a demand study. And their report shows us at today that the demand of Nigerians for electricity is 28,500. What we have available is 8,500. So you can see it's not even up to a quarter of what Nigerians want. But because of the bottlenecks in terms of transmission and distribution, we need to see how we can design a model. And I'm glad that the Honorable Minister is here, is listening. After this meeting, I don't mind meeting with you to elaborate more on this solution. So what we need to do is the vested quantity, which is the one that NBET assigned with the discos, they should be held to that quantity. And that quantity was set at 4,500 at privatization. The design was that outside the 4,500, the discos should sign a bilateral contract with the GENCOs to take extra quantities. Now, this is what is restricting us, because when you call a typical disco, they will say, this is my MITO allocation. The MITO allocation is strangulating the market. The MITO allocation is at 4,000.
You know what, Dr. Joy Ogaji, Kirian, there are issues here, some of it a bit technical for our viewers, but it is clear that they speak to the bottlenecks along the value chain. I'm just wondering, the Honorable Minister, I want to move away from some of these technical, Kirian, I want to move away from some of these slight technicalities and then just get into an area that you may need to help explain. There is, under the Federal Ministry of Power, the Rural Electrification Agency. Why should the federal government be responsible for rural electrification? And it turns out that in the past, that ROEA has been an avenue of slits. Some of the persons involved have been tried in the past on account of corruption and so on and so forth. I'm asking this question. What is the responsibility of state governments or even local governments if they cannot deal with rural electrification? Samuel Ogbemudia, when he was military governor of the old Bende, ran ROEB, that is Rural Electricity Board, and it was very efficient. Why is the federal government bothering about rural electrification when the bigger elephant on his head, is still wobbling to steady it?
Well, but we have to be worried. It is the responsibility of both the government, both federal and the state government. In the situation where the state government will tell you have no money to electrify villages, what do you do as a federal government? And you have to provide your people with electricity. And that is why, as a result, it's coming. So it is the responsibility of the REA now to make sure that all those that aren't served or the ones that are not served to be served with electricity. That is why we have to come in.
Kirian, I'll just make this point, Kirian. Just a point. But, I don't know how much supervision goes on. Because there are certain communities where the federal government, ROEA, is working to say we are electrifying, and then the state government also is saying that we are bringing electricity to that particular community. You see their cables on the same line.
Honorable Minister, the truth is that there is a lot of jobs to be done in terms of realignment, whatever that it is, because a situation where, as Kingsley explained, the federal government is doing rural electrification, state government is doing the same thing. It's a duplication of efforts, and if a state government cannot do something about electrifying its localities, it's entirely a different matter. But I want you to come in here. Let's say, I know you have touched it, initially, and that's the issue of Mambila, Kashimbila, and what have you. Bring us up to speed with the level of development in those two infrastructure, and that is one. Secondly, Honorable Minister, could there be a policy of government that will enable states, or if you like, regions, so to speak, to get involved in power, so that we will not concentrate on national grid, so that power can be in such a way that subnational governments can engage in power, so that by the time that is done, we reduce the bulk of what is on the Federal Minister of Power. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, it's very possible. Currently, what we are saying now, the 40% share of the government that we're talking about, 25% of it is mostly state government investment. But the problem is that the state government don't want to spend money also for the infrastructure. It is the responsibility of the federal government. That is why we are saying we are coming in through the cement. By the time we finish, we now assess the liquidity and then share the portion again.
Nobody, Kashimbila and the Mambila power projects.
But they are also coming in. That is why I say by the time this is completed and commissioned, we are going to increase the generation of the power, the GENCO, with 30%. She is just telling you that it is still not enough with the generating. We still need more, and we're still looking for more investors to come for generation. The only problem we have is the misalignment. Once the alignment is corrected, and everything will flow, and then we will still need more investors to come.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Let's return to Oyebode Fadikbe via Skype. Mr. Fadikbe, of course, you've listened to all the arguments and the comments by the other guests on this issue. Exactly what are the other equity holders in the discos doing? Because we keep hearing that some discos reject power, they reject power. When is this going to be over? Are you as investors also sitting on your pants and waiting for another Siemens to come and help you out? What kind of investment are you also bringing on? Well, I don't know. Fadikwe, you seem to have lost us, but it's a question I would like you to respond to because that's a critical aspect. Oh, I understand that. I know that we've lost him. Engineer Farouk Yabo, very quickly, what would you like to see the other equity holders in the discourse do other than the government side? Very briefly.
Well, I think to create transparency within the market collections, I think that's the key issue. We must get to a level where the collections in the market are transparently displayed for everybody to see. And we have the advantage of technology to do that today. Now, having said that, I think 2 or 3 issues have been raised which are very apt. I think the issue of Siemens that was mentioned by Korean. I think it's good to understand that the Siemens is coming with funding, and the funds are going to be more or less convertible funds that could be eventually shareholders' loans that can be converted into equity. But the most important thing is to get the sector to be in a situation whereby expansion can go on. The Siemens program phase 1 is supposed to take us end-to-end 7,000 megawatts by the end of next year, and then end-to-end 11,000 megawatts by the end of year 2003, and then 25,000 megawatts by the year 2025. So I think if we can be able to address that would be a perfect thing. Also, the issue of Rural Education Agency was raised. You see, the concept and purpose of Rural Education Agency is captured in the Act. The source of funding has been defined, and the idea is really because government realized it cannot go on electrifying everywhere, and government also realized that the distribution companies or the private sector may not be interested in doing that. So government decides to set up a fund under the name of Rural Electrification Fund, which is going to be a counterpart support to either the state, the local government, or private sector. So I think if we are able to, just like the Honorable Minister is doing, and I think that's why he made some changes in REA.
All right, Engineer Farouk, we have to stop you there. And I'll also let you know that some individuals are also giving power to rural areas. There are some individuals who have done that, where I come from. So all these complexities concerning the power sector can be minimized, when certain policies are really put into practice. And at this point, we'd like to appreciate all of you for being part of our program this morning, especially, of course, the Honorable Minister who is coming here for the very first time. We want to thank him for sharing his thoughts and, of course, his time on this particular program. Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Maman, it's been wonderful hosting you this morning. Thank you for coming. And Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo, you have so many titles, but I would just say you're the Acting Director, Renewable Energy and Rural Power Access. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Dr. Joy Ogadi, Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, thank you for coming. Of course, she brought in some technicalities that I didn't understand. Yeah, and via Skype, we had Oyebode Fadikbe, Head Corporate Communications, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. We also thank you for coming. It's on this note that we conclude today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kirian Umayo. Have a great day.
We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.